Bernie, the other gentleman, Mr. Bernie. He was there in the room.
You're over there, Brian. Over there. We moved you. Sarah did it. Sarah did it. Did you want to use this microphone? Bob, you want to use this mic? This one's better.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I went to the planning commission meeting that was 3 hours long. Because I was curious.
See how this would go. Hold on, I gotta turn my mic off. Let Mr. Brian get seated, Miss Sarah.
You're gonna need it before I do.
That's what I was going to say.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us for our February Design Review Commission meeting for the City of Germantown. At this time, I'd like to establish a quorum.
Mr. Kumar,
Yes.
Mr. Sloan,
Present.
Mr. Schmidt,
Here.
Ms. Sherman. Here. Mr. Carney,
Here.
Mr. White,
Here.
Alderman Owens,
Here.
Chairman Bruns.
I am here. Thank you. Next, we will approve the minutes of the January 28th, 2020 meeting. Do I have a motion?
Motion to approve. Second.
Any discussion?
You second.
Hearing none, please call roll.
Ms. Sherman,
Yes.
Alderman Owens,
Yes.
Mr. Kumar,
Yes.
Mr. Schmidt,
Yes.
Mr. White,
Yes.
Mr. Sloan,
Yes.
Mr. Carney,
Yeah. Yes.
Chairman Bruns.
Yes. January meeting minutes are approved, and that will bring us to the consent agenda. Some may be delighted, as we made some modifications during the executive session. The consent agenda for tonight's meeting is 4A, Apple, for the approval of a revised wall sign. 4B, First Horizon, approval of a revised ground-mounted sign, specifically illumination. 4C, Village Shops of Forest Hill, approval of the dumpster location. 4D, Baptist Rehabilitation Hospital, approval of building modification and minor site modifications. And now we have 4E, Exeter Road, formerly Baptist Specialty Hospital. It was approval of facade modifications and landscape plan improvements for the medical offices. And 4F, ECS, approval of a revised final site plan and building addition, landscape plan and tree mitigation. Are there anyone in the audience or commissioners that would like to have any of these items removed from the consent agenda? Very good. I'd like to remind all the commissioners that by voting on the consent agenda, you are agreeing to each of these cases as they have been listed. You have read and reviewed each of the applications with staff and the applicant and have determined no further discussion is necessary. May I have a motion for the consent agenda?
Motion to approve the consent agenda as written. Second.
Very good.
Mr. Schmidt,
Yes.
Mr. White,
Yes.
Alderman Owens,
I vote yes, with the exception of the Evangelical Christian School, of which my house is located directly adjacent to, and I will recuse myself on that particular item.
Mr. Carney,
Yes.
Mr. Sloan,
Yes, with the exception of 4C, Village Shops of Forest Hill. I will be recusing myself from that as well.
Mr. Kumar?
Yes, with the exception to 4B, which is First Horizon. I'm recusing on that.
Okay. And Ms. Sherman? Yes. Chairman Bruns?
Yes. The consent agenda has been approved. If you are on the consent agenda, you are welcome to leave and enjoy your evening. We're going to move on with our regular agenda for the rest of you here. I think the majority of us this evening. Item 5A, Dogwood Elementary School. Staff presentation, please.
Mr. Chairman, before we get started, I will be recusing myself on this item as well. My daughter goes to Dogwood Elementary School, and so I'm going to recuse myself.
Thank you, Alderman Owens.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the commission. Item 5C on tonight's agenda is Dogwood Elementary School at 8945 Dogwood Road, approval of a revised preliminary and final site plan for the 140-foot tall cell tower. This application is located in the R residential zoning district at Dogwood Road, just north of Dogwood Park and on the school district property. The proposed location is a revision of what this commission saw in 2019 at the end of March. Just to go over a brief bit of history as it relates to this application. In September of 2018, the Board of Education for Germantown Municipal School District approved the option in the land lease agreement with Tower Ventures for a new cell tower at the site. Per the ordinance 2386C2, wireless transmission facilities are allowed within residential districts with the approval of a use on appeal by the Board of Zoning Appeals. In December of 2018, the BZA granted a use on appeal to allow this cell tower at Dogwood Elementary School. The Planning Commission approved the site plan for this site in February of 2019. And again, this commission approved the site plan, landscaping, and variances associated with this at the end of March 2019. This request, however, did not advance to the Board of Aldermen for review and approval of the construction development agreement. The pursuit of a revised location was requested, so in May of 2019, the Planning Commission Subcommittee reviewed a revised location for the cell tower still located on the Dogwood Elementary School property, but within the functional limits of Dogwood Park. The application was withdrawn by the applicant due to complications associated with Tennessee Department of Conservation grants that had been in place for the park property. On January 13th, 2020, the Board of Education approved an amended option and land lease agreement for a revised location of the cell tower that is in front of you tonight. The location is tucked back into the tree line slightly. It moves it from 148 feet away from the building to 180 feet from the building. This location received recommended approval from the Planning Commission on February 4th, 2020 for the revised final and preliminary site plan for this revised location. This is the site plan as it's been revised. The location of the access road remains the same. The entry into the site and the enclosure of the tower and the tower itself have been moved south from the originally approved location to a revised location within the tree line that moves it from, again, 148 feet away from the closest point of Dogwood Elementary School to 180 feet away from the school. The location is approximately 35 feet from the edge of the playground on the north side of Dogwood Park. This playground area is still located on the school district's property. The applicant has provided a structural engineering review that indicates that the fall zone of the tower is 25 feet. Per the ordinance, the fall zone of the tower must be 140 feet plus an extra 10 feet unless this review from structural engineers is provided to indicate that the fall zone is smaller in terms of a collapsible area. However, in the best interest of this playground equipment, the applicant has agreed to move the playground equipment at their expense to a location to be determined by the Parks Department as they look at the Dogwood Park and the appropriate location for this equipment. The Parks Director is currently working with the manufacturer of this playground equipment to determine logistics for moving it, and will come back with the appropriate location prior to construction of the cell tower. As it relates to the ordinance 2386H and I, the parcel must have a minimum of 200 feet of public street frontage. The tower must be set back from property lines a minimum distance of the tower's height plus 10 feet. All associated buildings and structures must meet the minimum setback distances of the zoning district. The applicant's engineer must provide documentation that the wireless transmission facility meets or exceeds the standards for radio frequency emissions. The maximum tower height is 140 feet. The tower shall be designed for shared use, and a minimum buffer strip of 50 feet consisting of landscaping and screening is required on the outer perimeter of the property. As stated previously, the applicant, as it relates to number 3, has provided documentation to show that they have a collapsible fall zone that meets the requirement as it relates to the distance from the playground equipment. In regards to number 7, which is the buffer strip of 50 feet required on the outer perimeter of the property, the revised location of the cell tower and equipment is set back over 50 feet from the perimeter of the property. There is not a 50-foot landscaping and screening buffer as described. However, the equipment enclosure will be screened from public view at the street with existing and proposed landscaping. Per 2386 I1C, the landscaping provisions can be varied or reduced if the proposed plan provides for unique and innovative landscaping treatment or physical features that, in the opinion of this commission, meet the intent and purpose of this section. In instances where these physical features, for example, railroads, major roads, hillsides, preserved wooded areas, utility easements, etc., which in the opinion of the DRC provide adequate buffering between land uses, the existing buffers may also be used to meet the landscaping provisions of this section. That is a direct quote from the zoning code. The applicant is also proposing an 8-foot tall fence on top of a proposed retaining wall, which will have a varying height around the equipment enclosure. This is in compliance with 2386 I1D. The applicant is not proposing any lighting or generator power on site. Any generators would have to be brought to the site in the event of a power failure. As part of the revised location, the applicant has provided a tree mitigation plan. As determined, there were 3 trees worthy of retention per their inventory that totaled 99 caliper inches that will have to be removed. In accordance with the section 22107 of the city's vegetation ordinance. The applicant has provided a mitigation plan that satisfies the requirements of the ordinance. This is a detail of the locking system that would be provided as part of the retaining wall system, a stackable locking system. You saw the samples of this in the executive session. The applicant, as indicated on their drawing, has provided for the fence that will be a site limited fence, meaning the boards will be abutted directly against one another so that fingers of any shape and size cannot get through, nor can you see through those slats. Will be to 8 foot tall around the entire enclosure. We'll have a top cap on the enclosure and will be brought to the edge of the cap of the retaining wall. And the retaining wall will be brought forward in a way that there's not a step up at that point. They're also providing Nellie Holly Stevens around the edge of this. Let me go back to that. These will be in heights of approximately 8 feet around the edge so as to mitigate any view of the fence as it may be shown in the areas where it goes a little bit higher as the retaining wall goes higher, moving in this east to west direction. The retaining wall will rise to just around 4 feet. This is photo simulations of the proposed monopine tower around the site. These are new trees that will be provided as part of the tree mitigation plan. This is a view looking from Ashmere Drive, which is south of Dogwood Park, looking into the park north. This is a view from Willinghurst Drive, looking eastward back into the park you can see the school building on the top of the hill at this point. With that, the applicant has also provided updates to their gate plan that illustrates the use of a similar material rather than a chain link fence. They have clarified the height of the fence. Need to indicate that the fence cap shall also be of cedar. And following a decision of approval by the DRC, the applicant may submit construction drawings to the city's engineering division. Following completion of that review, the proposal would proceed forward to the Board of Mayor and Aldermen for approval of the cell tower and the development contract. If approved by the Board of Mayor and Aldermen, the applicant may submit to Shelby County a building permit application. That concludes staff's presentation. At this point, I would like to turn it over to DRC Council for a word regarding legal precedents on this site.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ross. Mr. Chairman, just to everybody keep everything in perspective, the criteria for our discussion tonight has to do specifically with the jurisdiction of the Design Review Commission. The location has already been determined, the zoning has already been approved, so the only things that we have to discuss tonight have to do with the criteria by which the Design Review Commission approves or disapproves of certain projects. So that is to say, we'll be looking at the design, the materials, we're looking at the fencing, screening, landscaping, topics like that. I'd like to remind everyone here on the commission and in the audience that any concerns about radio frequency radiation cannot be considered. That topic has been preempted by federal regulation and federal statute and case law. So any discussion cannot center around and should not cite any concerns in that regard. So Having said that, please keep these things in mind as we discuss this issue tonight. Thank you.
Thank you for that. I would now like to invite the applicant for a presentation.
So am I looking at it? No. She's done.
Sorry.
Ready? Ladies and gentlemen, the project that's before you is very, very similar to the one that you approved a year ago. We believe that based on the desire of the school board to relocate the tower out from the area that was the playground area into the woods, has actually brought us a project to you tonight that was better than the one we had before. During those discussions, there were a lot of topics of could you move it further from the school? Could you keep it out of the play area? This does do that. What doesn't change is the access drive that comes in from the turnaround area has not changed. It's exactly where it was where you saw it before. But when you get to the compound is in essence flipped on the other side of the road. We're in an area there that's a little bit lower. So as we go through our presentation, we'll show you why it's a little bit different. The other thing we wanted to bring up to your attention as well was at the Planning Commission, there was a great deal of discussion about the fence and the fence material. And at subcommittee, we had a great deal of discussion about concerns about children having a ledge that they could crawl up on. The new plan that you'll see down the bottom right shows that now what's happened is the wall comes up, the fence abuts the cap, as you all asked us to do. So in essence, there's no ledge for shoes or feet or anyone to climb. Beyond that, the fence being 8 feet tall was a request by the Planning Commission to give us even more coverage. They felt that 8 feet would be safer. So our original application was for 6 feet. It was changed to 8 feet for that very reason. Now, one of the discussions that also was brought up early when we were told, can you go out there and put some flagging in? We did. One of the problems with putting the flagging in this particular site is we made one critical mistake when we were at subcommittee. When the surveyor was up on the ladder, his arms were not big enough to be able to go around some of these trees. So what we ended up doing was we ended up putting in a PK, an aluminum nail, in the tree, which will be removed, and hung flagging on it, and you'll see pictures of that. But we ended up doing 4 trees so that you get an idea of the relationship to that. Now, what I'm going to call to your attention on this particular picture is that you will notice there are 2 corners here. When we look down at this southwest corner, that wall is 4.3 feet tall. That's our tallest section of the wall. When we go up to the opposite side over here, it's only 2 feet tall. I believe it's 2 feet 1 tall, 2 feet 11, 2.11. Now, when we go above that, the one on the right, the top of the wall being 8 feet, that would be 10. And then we get over to this side, we would be at 12.3 feet. Those are the tallest points. As we go back towards the drive, basically the wall dies into the ground. So when you see the height and you see 12 feet, that's only in that one extreme spot. You've seen this photo simulation, but we also wanted to call out a couple things to you that you may have not noticed in the beginning as well. The trees that, well, let's go back. The trees that you see here, obviously we know those are new. And we highlighted this one because if we hadn't highlighted it, we wouldn't have seen the tower. We also have trees that are back in the back, and as Brandon makes a presentation, there will also be other trees that are in between these trees you see in the front and the trees that are in front of the compound. Now, when we went out and staked this, as you all have, I don't know if any of you have been back out there to see it, we've had some rather wet periods of time to get this done. We were able to get this done just a few days ago. But I want to call your attention, This corner we're looking at, this is the 36-inch tree that you would see near the southeast corner. It's hard to tell what happens with the terrain, but when we draw this cyan line through the property, that gives you an idea of how the property is slowly descending from the school site. As again, you're also looking at that same tree, you see this tree 71. Beyond that, you'll see there's the enclosure. So once again, one of our problems with trying to give you an idea of reference, it was very difficult because we've got vegetation even though it is in the winter. Now this site is probably the most critical site. This is one everyone really wanted to see. This is that corner that the wall is 12 feet tall. What you see here, that's where the top of the wall would be. There's the corner of the compound. So actually, where you see the tree is offset. It's not in our compound area, but what I call to your attention is this area right here. Just beyond that is the grass of the playing field. That gives you an idea of how much the site drops. So I hope these gave you an idea of the relationships of these two, but it's a little difficult to show. Now, when I'm on the opposite side of that corner, and I'm looking back at that same post, now I'm on the field, this gives you an idea of the height of the fence from the soccer field. It's the same thing we just showed you a second ago. That same tree that you see here, when I move it forward and I'm from the field, that's what it looks like. Brandon's going to pick it up from here and give you more responses on the landscaping.
Good evening. Brandon Doss, Blair Parker Design, 5159 Wheelus Drive, Memphis, Tennessee. Thank you guys for being here tonight and listening to our spiel. As Mike said, this landscape plan, again, is very similar to what was reviewed and approved by this DRC just a little over a year ago. There's a couple of changes because that compound was moved from the north side to the south side. There's been some trees that have been removed, and I'll show you an enlargement of the mitigation plan in a moment. But because of that, we've added some additional shrubs on the south side of the compound, as the south side now was a little more exposed than previous iterations. Here's that enlargement of the mitigation plan. There it is. So there are 5 trees that are being removed. 3 of those are deemed to be worthy of being mitigated. Those 5 are shown with those X's there. There's a question as well from the arborist with the city as to a tree that was a twin 36-inch oak and that might be in this area. That tree is actually tree number 67, so you can see that's actually south and east of this compound. There's a little confusion because that tree symbol wasn't scaled to match that tree size, so that was the point of confusion there. But just a point of clarification on that. So the 5 trees are removed. 3 of those are deemed worthy of mitigating. That came out to the 99 inches, which Cameron mentioned, and that led us to the planting of 40 new trees at 2.5 inches in caliper each, which gives us the 100 inches of new trees to be planted to meet that mitigation ratio. I'm happy to go into the caliper size again if you don't remember that conversation from last year, but I can do that for you guys later. Here is the full tree mitigation plan. As you can see, these trees along the buffer between the compound and Dogwood Road have only changed in location. They have not changed in species or number as previously reviewed by the board. We've only pulled those a little from their previous location a little further north back south to blend further into the tree line and to, again, stay further out of the open play field that the children use for field day and other recreation activities. We've also added some mitigation trees along the western boundary, along the eastern boundary, and then planted some more street trees and parking lot landscaping along Dogwood Road itself. And members of the school administration have reviewed these tree locations and approved them to make sure that we're not interfering with any activities we were not aware of, but that they would also be beneficial to to the school, but also the nearby residents. There's some discussion on tree species. I believe, Paul, you had some questions on that, and we can get into that if you'd like to. Here's just a slight enlargement of that plan. This is the sample of the cut sheet of the retaining wall. We provided you guys with two samples, one the sandstone blend and one the Bethany ledge blend. The Dogwood School itself is a darker brown brick with a beige mortar. And so either one of those, I believe, would blend with the school well, but also be of the natural earth tones that we discussed at the DRC subcommittee meeting. My recommendation would be the sandstone blend, but yeah, I believe either one of those options would work. That's all that I've got. I'm happy to answer any questions. Mike, if you've got anything else, are ready for questions. So again, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Doss. Once y'all have finished your presentation, as you have, then we were going to open up a public hearing, and then if we have questions,
Okay.
then we'll
Yep,
bring you back
that's fine
forward
with
to ask those questions. Which now it is time to open a public hearing. And the way we have decided to format this public hearing is that there will be a time for those in favor to speak for 15 minutes, and then those in opposition to speak for 15 minutes collectively. So if you need to organize who wants to speak or who's going to speak, we will keep a clock for 15 minutes. And then when the 15 minutes is up, then we will close the public hearing. So at this time, is there anyone here to speak in favor? Well, pardon me. Let me officially open up the public hearing. And now that I've done that, is there anyone here that would like to speak in favor of this agenda item? Very well. Is there anyone here that would like to speak in opposition of this agenda item? Very well, I will ask. I don't know how to prioritize who wants to speak or who is going to speak, so I'm going to try to put that very well. You will speak first. We will start the clock when you begin speaking, and then we'll go from there. 15 minutes for all of you. Yes, I believe y'all did this in the Planning Commission, so we're following this. 5-minute warnings, 3 minutes.
So I'm going to try to speak for 3 minutes. There's, I believe, 5 of us that are going to try to speak.
Very, very good, very
Okay.
good. So we
All
will
right.
notify you of time.
Chairman, can you
Yes.
get them to speak their name?
Yes,
Yes.
name and
Oh.
address, please.
My name is Sophia Cole. I live at 9196 Sycamore Creek Cove. All right.
Very good.
Okay, well, again, thank you for your time today, and thank you for the time you dedicate to the community and to support us. I'm here today to express my opposition to the cell phone tower being placed on Dogwood property. Specifically, for the next couple of minutes, I'd like to focus on my concerns in the fall zone and setback requirements that are outlined in the city ordinance, section 23.86 that Mr. Ross mentioned earlier. As he earlier talked about, the minimum distance requirement is the length of the tower plus 10 feet, which obviously it's 150 feet. The Ventures Towers propose that the design of the tower is some kind of collapsible form that collapses into itself, 35, 25 feet. I know there's been multiple exceptions and variances that they submitted. I really would urge you guys to look into that and really to confirm that what they submitted, in fact, meets those requirements. I believe there were 4 requirements that were listed. Based on what I've seen and talking to some of the other, some of my friends that understand this design, I would really urge you to look at every one of those 4 requirements and in fact confirm that what they submitted meets that objective. I'm also glad that they're discussing moving the Caterpillar, which is within 35 feet, but if you spend any time on that playground, you will understand that while that structure is 35 feet away, the kids are everywhere. They're not congregated in that structure. They're going to be outside that fence. They're going to be everywhere in the trees. I feel that this is a safety concern, and based on the information that they provided, I don't believe that it meets those safety concerns. I would just really, in summary, kind of encourage you to look into what they submitted. There's been so many variances. I think it's become kind of muddy what's really happening. I just want you to focus on the concerns and if what they submitted meets those requirements. Another standard that listed in the city ordinance is to preserve and protect the character of the district in which the proposed use is located. and really question, is this tower being placed on the park property next to a school really meets that criteria? Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Next speaker, please. That was roughly 2.5 minutes, just for those keeping time.
Good evening. I'm Kristen Waddell. My address is 8345 Glen Meadow Lane, Germantown. So the design review manual states that nature should be the dominant visual characteristic of the city, even in commercial areas, and the utilitarian elements should be masked from public view. Not only does this tower not comply with the guidelines set in the manual, it is asking for entirely too many exceptions that would make a gross error and irreversible eyesore in our city. Unfortunately, the cell tower companies have already influenced the city to adjust the maximum cell tower from 100 feet to 140 feet, and this tower will reach that maximum, almost twice the height of most of the surrounding trees in the area. Some of the exceptions being granted for this tower collectively are that the tower required on an appeal from the Board of Zoning Appeals to even be placed in a residential district, that there is not a 50-foot landscaping buffer as described in the Section 2386 I-1A and B that they've referenced already this evening. The maximum allowable fence height of 6 feet is being exceeded by up to 6 feet along certain areas, which is twice the recommendation and ordinance. The setback area, which should be at 150 feet, which she just addressed, is being proposed at only 25 feet, which is 16% of the requirement of the ordinances as well. That despite what the applicant may claim, the tower is proposed for a space that is actively used for our children and families daily. It is taking away from our park space. It is such a direct contradiction to one of the Germantown Parks and Recreations Department's Tier 1 priorities to practice preservation and protection of cultural, historical, and natural resources as stated in the 2018 Parks and Rec Master Plan. How many rules is the city going to bend to enable this tower? Who is going to take a step back and ask, what are we doing to Germantown? What precedent are we setting if to say that it's okay to take away natural park space to make a space for a commercial utility? And in no way does this tower make nature the dominant visual characteristic, nor does it mask the utilitarian elements from this view. Please vote no to this tower. Thank you.
Thank you. Will the next speaker please step forward?
Hello. My name is Casey Carrillo. I live at 8986 Ashmere Drive. I'm here tonight to represent my family, my 2 boys and my husband. Gavin's 7 years old and in the 1st grade at Dogwood, and Sebastian's 10 years old in the 3rd grade. We've lived in our home for 6 years, and it borders the Dogwood Park on the east side. We're just feet away from the swing set, if you're familiar with the park. For as long as my boys can remember, they've been free to explore Dogwood Park. Almost all of our free time is spent there together as a family with neighborhood friends. On a beautiful day, dozens of children will be out there making up games, playing football on the field, and exploring the woods. I've heard Tower Ventures plans to tuck this cell phone tower in the woods away from play areas. Let me assure you, no one knows Dogwood Park better than my family. And this location is exactly on top of the children's play area, nature trail, between the Caterpillar and around the soccer field. Children use those woods as a shortcut to and from the field, and there's nothing about this tower that is tucked away. Since we have become familiar with this proposed project, we have learned the term attractive nuisance. Basically, by placing this new structure in the middle of our children's play area, they will naturally be curious and prone to explore it. For as long as they remember, that's exactly what this area is for. This tower is twice the height of the surrounding trees, and it would be an awful addition to the natural view that I have from my backyard. Placing a structure like this in a play area is completely unprecedented in our family-centered community. Who is held liable when an accident occurs? I am absolutely concerned for the safety of our children. Our neighborhood is full of young families attracted to the park and the school. Placing a dangerous structure on the land with a 140-foot tower and plain view out of the west window of my home will lower the property of my home of my value of my home, excuse me. I've read as much as 20%. I ask for the good of Germantown. Please vote no.
Thank you very much. There is 8 minutes remaining, and so next speaker, please.
Hi, I'm Bess Warren. I live at 2489 Netherhall Drive. Very similarly to Casey, I live near the park, and we bought our house specifically because we wanted walkability. We are able to walk to the park and to the school. We also bought in the Dogwood District because it had a great reputation. Having a park nearby is part of the 2030 Germantown plan. I know that Germantown plans to build even more parks so that every neighborhood can have a park that they go to. I feel like our neighborhood park is getting destroyed. My children grew up in those woods. Every single day they played in those woods, exactly where they're putting the cell phone tower. In fact, Mr. Fahey here drove up in his Porsche SUV and walked into those woods one day when there were about 50 kids running through those woods. And he had about an hour-long cell phone conversation in those woods where supposedly no one can get a cell phone signal. And he was saying things that the kids overheard, such as, "We're ready to clear the area, the land's ready to go." And it really upset the children because that's where they play every day. I just don't understand. He says that this plan is very, very similar to the plan that you approved a year ago, except the fall zone changed from 150 feet to 25. That doesn't make any sense. Also, he said we moved it off the playground. The woods are still the playground. If the Caterpillar playset is being moved, it's not off the playground. You're putting a cell phone tower on a children's playground. And those pictures that were shown seem to be from the perspective of an ant lying in the road on Dogwood Road. I'm a photographer, and I can tell you that that photographer probably had to lay down. I mean, it's not a real photographer, but if there were a real tower there, there's no way it would look like those pictures. This tower will be 2 stories higher than Le Bonheur Children's Hospital. And we all know that you can see Le Bonheur Children's Hospital from St. Jude, you can see it from downtown, you can see it from all parts of the city. So this tower is going to be the dominant feature of our neighborhood. If you build it, please do not.
Thank you.
Good afternoon or evening. My name is Ryan Scoggin, 9516 Still Meadow Drive in Germantown. I want to start by saying thank you for taking the time to sit on this board and assure that Germantown will continue to develop in a way that will protect its status as one of the premier cities in Tennessee. Before we close out the opposition to this project, I just want to summarize how a yes vote or a no vote will be heard, both by the vast majority of this audience and the Germantown public. A yes vote means that the city has bowed to political and corporate pressure to deface a park, school, and beautiful neighborhood in one fell swoop. A yes vote means that the current administration has been given the green light to literally cast a shadow on the beacon of light that is our highly sought-after school system. A yes vote will mean that every Germantown resident now has to scour public notices and board agendas to see what may be developed in the park, school playground, or empty lot next to their home. A yes vote means that the city can find nothing wrong with placing an attractive nuisance that is over twice the height of any surrounding tree, roofline, or hilltop next to an elementary school and park. On the other hand, a no vote. A no vote means that the city of Germantown has continued in its legacy to create and foster communities that are aesthetically pleasing and flow with nature. A no vote means you want to follow the Germantown's design review manual that states nature should be the dominant visual characteristic of the city. A no vote means you have questions about how a 140-foot tall structure can possibly fall neatly within a 25-foot radius during a windstorm. A no vote means we can take additional steps to assess other locations and also bring current tower locations up to standard with newly adopted regulations allowing taller towers. A no vote means you don't believe a tree that will take 20 years to fully mature will screen this massive tower from the view of residents, students, and teachers. A no vote means this rare, naturally wooded public area will continue to be a playground, classroom, outdoor laboratory, and adventureland for the Germantown youth as originally intended. A no vote means Germantown residents can rest assured that their interests are being protected by the local government and the property values will not be negatively impacted by projects such as these. Tonight, you have been placed on this board because you have the expertise to make this decision, the knowledge of the Germantown design standards to make this decision, and therefore the power to decide no on this project as it is presented. Please vote no and do what is best for your community. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any further speakers? There is 3 minutes if someone would like to speak in opposition.
I'm Jennifer Bell, 2111 Prestwick Drive. I wanted to make a comment about this fall zone. The applicant provided a letter from an engineer in Utah as their proof that the fall zone of 25 feet was accurate. But the letter actually says that it is impossible to predict the behavior of a falling structure. Physics of a fall during a wind event may place all or part of the ruptured pole section outside of the intended fall zone. Non-structural components attached to the steel structure are outside of our scope. The technical letter by this engineer in Utah does not support a 25-foot fall zone. Thank you.
Thank you. 2.5 minutes. If anyone would like to speak, I'd encourage you to speak.
Good evening. Jesse Moore, 2651 Holly Springs Drive. If I could, there's a proposed landscape plan that we could go back to. You've had a chance to review it. I just wanted to draw your attention to the cut that we're going to take into the earth and the erosion concerns that I have. They're objective concerns. I haven't seen any proof that this erosion will not be an issue. As we all know, that trees have roots, and every tree that's on there has a root system that will be impacted by a 4-foot ditch, which is shown on the plan. If it won't be impacted by the ditch, it will be suffocated by that road. So you can count on something happening to that tree line. I'm not going to try to predict, but there will be an impact to the erosion, just for your consideration.
Thank you, sir. 1.5 minutes if anyone would like to speak. If not, I can close the public hearing, but I want to make sure everyone has a chance. Very well. We will then close the public hearing, and now it will be time for our applicant to rebut the comments we just heard from the citizens.
Yes, Brandon Doss again. I've got one item. BPD is actually working on a project with Le Bonheur Children's Hospital, and so I reached out to their building facilities management. One of the ladies spoke and said that this tower would be taller than Le Bonheur Hospital, and that's not correct. Based on the building elevations used for the construction documents, that Le Bonheur Hospital tower is 237.33 feet tall, not including the basement, which is visible from both Adams and Poplar moving east to west. So just a point of clarification, I have the document if anyone needs or would like to see that. Mike?
Mr. Chairman, you know, this particular project has got a lot of hair on it. Everyone in this room has a lot of opinions. There's a lot of emotions on it. Matter before you today is we would remind you that this is a plan that you approved last year. And in our belief, it is an improvement of that plan because at that meeting, many of the residents asked us if we could put the tower further away from the school. They also asked us if we could move the tower outside of the grassed area. The school board heard those complaints. And the school board, after we had been through the entire process, said, wait a minute, we need to start over. And we did. And here we are again. But this new plan was as a result of those discussions that the school board had brought up. And the new tower is now pushed into the tree line. There's a few things I want to clarify first, and that's why I left this picture up. When you look at the drawing, you'll see the dashed line that's kind of the edge of the tree line. There's a lot of discussion and there's a lot of misinformation that this particular plan is going to destroy that. Now, I call to your attention just nothing more than the small box that you see in the middle versus all of the trees that you still see there on the property. There's also an error that's been made. This tower is not on the park property. This tower is on the school property. In fact, it's 170 feet on the school property, but part of the park also encroaches on that. One of the reasons that we're having to deal with the playground equipment is because the playground equipment that you see right here is not where it's supposed to be. The city of Germantown entered into an agreement with TDEC to put in an environmentally conscious playground. There are playgrounds all over here. That playground equipment was supposed to be below this line. It's not. So, first of all, so for a matter of the school board and liability, they'd like to see it moved as well. But in this particular case, my client has said, hey, we'd like to see it moved anyway. When we talk about safety for the kids, at the subcommittee, we went into a great deal of discussion about make that enclosure so that kids can't climb on it. I believe we've done that. I don't know how anyone could get up on this structure the way it's designed today. Some of the other parents have brought up questions about the fall zone letter, the ability of the clarity of what it says. But what's missing, ladies and gentlemen, is if there was such an event that the tower might fail, no one will be out there. If we have catastrophic winds at 140 miles an hour, and though that's happening out there that would cause this tower to fail, we would probably be in a pretty serious weather event, probably a tornado. As I've told the other boards before, Tuscaloosa went through a horrible tornado a few years ago. Houses were gone, completely wasted. If you saw a picture, it looked just like a tornado. The only thing standing was the cell towers. And with the cell towers, the cell tower companies were able to come up and hook up generators, and that was the emergency system for people to be able to communicate. So when we talk about safety, and talk about safety of children and safety of the area, the safety right now is the reason that the school system elected to put in a Wi-Fi system was because they had no service. I can't explain why one system works and one doesn't, but there is a Wi-Fi system in that school because they had such poor service. Now, by adding this particular equipment in there, it's going to make it even.
He gets his full rebuttal.
I call to your attention, as I said earlier, the matter is not in the park. You've seen what's happening with the tower. By tucking the tower in from where we had it approved, we believe we've improved the aesthetics. I think we would all agree that the addition of removing 3 trees that would be impacted, 1 tree that actually has fallen down, and we are still going to mitigate it. We've improved the plan that you saw before. We've added 40 more trees that weren't in that plan, just to offset for those particular trees. I also want to bring one other thing to your attention that is a real critical fact that we all need to keep in mind. There's only one reason we're here tonight. One very simple reason. We all use our phones. The only reason that the carrier has to put a tower in this location is because the demand is there. It's not a capricious thing that they say, hey, let's go build one over here and hope that they connect. The demand is there today. The service demand is there today. When the flood happened just blocks away from here, people had no service. AT&T had to come out and put in a temporary device in front of the fire department just to meet the demand. So it's established. And at the Planning Commission, it was brought up by the technology chief as well as the fire department. There's a problem here, a serious health and safety problem. That's not matters that you normally deal with, but ladies and gentlemen, it needs to be said that that's why we're here tonight. We are the problem. We use our phones more and more every day. We are the reason that the demand has gotten so high. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Leahy. Very good. I would now entertain a motion.
And, Mr. Chairman, just to be clear on the Roberts Rules of Order, we will propose the motion and then we will
discuss.
Discuss.
Correct. This is in no way a for or against. This is simply a motion on the floor.
All right, I would like to propose a motion to approve a revised preliminary and final site plan for a new 140-foot wireless transmission facility, cell phone tower, including the tree mitigation as proposed, as well as exceptions to the landscape screening requirements per section 23-86, subsection I, subsection 1, and the allowable fence height per section 6-102 at Dogwood Elementary School, located at 8945 Dogwood Road, subject to the commission's discussion, staff comments, and the staff report, and the documents and plans submitted with the application.
Second.
Thank you. Now we are free to discuss as commissioners, and I believe I'm going to confer with council. We can call up the applicant to ask questions, should we have questions for the applicant, or applicant or all of them. Very good. Does anyone have any discussion initially, or would we prefer to bring up the applicant and question him and then discuss among ourselves?
Yeah, if we have questions, I would say.
Okay, would Michael and Brandon, because I will have questions for Brandon. Perhaps we'll just do this collectively, and if you wouldn't mind occupying the microphone as we're...
Happy to.
Okay, wonderful. This will work well. Very good. Who would like to start?
I want to clarify one thing, because the lady that brought up Le Bonheur, we've gotten a couple other emails and messages like that, giving us other examples. So I did a quick Google search here as well, and where the discrepancy is, this shows that it's a 12-story high hospital that comes up with 251 feet tall. So just to point out, this is, Le Bonheur is twice the height, more than twice the height of what we're dealing with, or it's a little less than twice the height of what we're dealing with?
Yes, about 100 feet less, but.
Okay.
I'm sorry, 100 feet more than the tower.
It really did get my attention, so that's why we wanted to look into it and clarify that.
It is 12 stories. Their average story ranges between 14 and up to 20 feet. So that, the typical rule of thumb when you measure a story is about 10 feet, but the Le Bonheur stories are much taller than that, which is why you have that height discrepancy there between the 140 or 120 feet for a 12-story building and the 237 or 251 foot building.
I understand.
But that hospital isn't located in a residential zone, correct?
That's correct.
No, sir. No, sir. Microphone only. Not from the crowd. No, sir. You won't be recognized.
Mr. Fay, when you were saying that no one would be outside in a catastrophic event, I believe an earthquake doesn't mean that you'd be inside. Not everyone's inside in an earthquake. So, that could be occurring during school or after school and kids are on the playground, earthquake could occur. So just to revise, point out that there are different types of catastrophic events besides hurricanes in this area. Because we do live in a seismic zone.
The tower is designed for seismic activity. It is designed to be able to withstand, as is required, as you know, by codes, all foundations in Memphis and Shelby County must hit the seismic code. So yes, it would be designed to carry that action.
Right, but per your own engineer's letter, there are elements and items that would fall outside of that zone. You can't, basically it has a disclaimer at the bottom of the paragraph saying that.
I would agree. There is no perfect response.
Okay.
Along those lines, the square footage of the fenced-in area, the tower is not perfectly centered in that fenced-in area.
It is offset to the side.
So if we drew a perfect square around where that tower is centered, if the tower is in the center of a square versus the rectangle as we're doing, what is the square footage of that square? Meaning if it's a 25-foot drop zone, is that rectangle 25 times 4, 100 square feet, meaning we have 25 square foot all the way around?
Well, if it collapses, it's designed to collapse in one direction. So it would collapse, it would be basically a circle. But since the design is a certain way, it would basically, it's not like it's a hinge. You know, it's not a hexagon, but it's got a structural design rather than being just round. And that design, when there's motion on it, if whatever it was hit it something, it would collapse in that particular direction, but it would stay in that direction. So it wouldn't be basically a square or a circle. It would be in one specific direction that was falling.
And again, none of us are engineers in speaking to the engineering of the tower, but it was voiced, and I would just like your clarification since you're in front of us on the tower and the details itself for the fall zone. What is the written fall zone as, I believe Utah was mentioned, or the engineers state for this particular monopine?
Well, I mean, the fall zone per the regulations would be the height of the tower plus 10 feet, unless you provide the structural letter. So.
There's a lot of concern about the tower falling. Are there any stats on how frequent that is?
Well, we all know that we can go online with Google and find just about anything. There have been a lot of pictures and things shown around that have, you know, guide poles. This tower is structurally designed to have the footing and the foundation to bear on itself. It has no need for any guys or anything to keep it in place. It's designed for the wind loads. It's designed for the equipment that's going to be on it that would cause any type of resistance due to wind. I think there was some confusion in the tower that we brought to you originally. The fall zone letter was 70 feet. We went back to the engineer and said, can we make it less? And the reason we made it 20, we asked him could we make it 25, was specifically for the playground. Now, once the playground moves, the 25 is even more of a safety factor.
Is everyone pretty satisfied in hearing with the tower, fall zone, all that bit? Because I'd like to move more toward a DRC-related item than we are with the engineering of the tower, seeing that we're not engineers, and speak to, I've heard variances and exceptions that were mentioned, certainly some that are before us tonight, erosion, tree damage, wetlands. Certainly I have my own list, so I would allow the floor to any of the other commissioners that perhaps had concerns on those issues.
I mean, you're asking for some of those to be addressed in terms of the wetlands? Or?
Well, certainly, to be brought up and questions answered if I have my own, but
No, I mean, I would go ahead and have that addressed.
Very good. And Brandon, this may be for both of you, as a matter of fact, because I know Wes Hopper, Natural Resource Managers for National, we're going to do it one more time. Natural Resource Manager for the City of Germantown has been involved with the trees, and the city engineer has been heavily involved with erosion. I personally spent a good bit of time with these plans and had at least 15 to 20 comments along all the lines that I heard tonight. Certainly erosion, the wetlands, the tree damage due to the roadway and swale, the planting. And so would you speak to some of those in this particular case?
Yep, I'd be happy to start, and if I miss anything or skip over something on accident, please just interject, and I'd be happy to answer. The trees, well, let's start with the shrubs around the perimeter. At the DRC subcommittee meeting, I believe it was brought up, the height of the shrubs at initial installation, excuse me. But all the sizes for both shrubs have been increased to meet what was discussed at the DRC subcommittee meeting. 7-foot minimum for the Nellie R. Stevens holly, and the Clayera, which handles shady conditions a little bit better, and has been pushed a little further into that tree line, or on the eastern side, has been pushed to a 4 to 6 foot shrub there. So those are two items that I believe were brought up. As far as the irrigation, I know that was brought up as well. These will be irrigated using what's referred to as a gator bag system or a similar. You see an image of one here. That is a watering device with perforations on the bottom that will slowly release water over time. Those bags will then be filled by the landscape contractor during the standard maintenance and warranty period, which is up to 1 year. If any tree or shrub shows signs of stress or doesn't make it, those will be replaced, and that 1 year warranty period will start again from whatever the date that it was replaced. So that's how that irrigation system works. Again, those will be monitored by the landscape contractor.
And I do appreciate you increasing the size. Certainly, the 12-foot, and this will bring us to the first conversation
Sure.
with a variance or being that it's 12 feet, and you had mentioned that the 8-foot fence was requested by Planning Commission, which I was unaware of till tonight.
Yes, that's correct.
But the idea of the safety around it in an 8-foot fence in this particular scenario with the lower lying, or as it is lower lying to the surroundings, certainly is what brought us to that need for the 8-foot fence is more safety related. And I think you're just as happy with a 6-foot fence, if I'm not mistaken, but we're led in the direction of an 8-foot fence for safety reasons.
That's correct.
Can I just interject quick? At what aspect is the elevation at, say, where is the true, like, 6-foot or 8-foot fence occurring? Is it really just that north elevation? Because basically the east and the west, the wall, you got a retaining wall, and then it's dying on the west side. So is it really just the west elevation, or does it get to the point where it's just the gate that is true grade?
And I think you make a really good point when you were talking about the 12-foot fence, and as I'd started earlier, the 12-foot fence is only in this spot. When we get down to here, the fence will only be 10 feet tall because the wall is just 2 feet, 2.11 high. So it's barely 2 feet 2 inches above the grade. So it's sloping down. That particular corner is where it slopes. But Mr. Chairman, I think you brought up in some of the other comments before, there was a question about the swales. There's one major improvement with this particular plan that didn't exist before this project. Currently, all of this area just drained from the school out into the wooded area. And those of you who've been out there have seen this, it's had scouring as a period of time. There's a lot of spots where there aren't any leaves. But with this new plan and putting in the access drive, we're actually going to split that drainage. So the drainage that hits the access drive will be rerouted down to the same spot. The drainage that is still going through the wooded area will still go there. There's one small swale that will just redirect it around the unit so that we're not filling. So in essence, the area that was getting scoured before has been reduced significantly.
And I heard the citizen speak to a 4-foot swale. Do you see any issue with tree roots or damage to existing trees with the grade work that's necessary in order to install the road or install the swales?
The intent of the swale that you see to this, just right in this area, and this plan actually shows, this is the twin 36-inch oak tree that the town arborist was talking about. That area will all be done by hand. As you said, we won't know what roots there are or where they physically are. The other swale that you see that goes beyond in this area, we actually relocated that swale and pushed it further out after staff made mention during the Planning Commission that there was a concern about the trees. And so that has been pushed out so that there would be no impact. That original plan also called out for a concrete swale, and after looking at it and talking with safety, some of the folks at the school, the concrete swale wasn't something they preferred. They would have much rather had the grass swale because, as we all know, in time, they erode, and now we have something for someone to trip on, fall on. So the grass swale was there. It'll be a trapezoidal swale that will just redirect the water. But keep in mind, we're only talking 10 CFS. All of the water on this site emanates from this site. The actual ridge line is right about here. So everything we're dealing with is just in that small spot. We're at the top of the hill.
Okay.
Can I add a question here real quick?
Please.
On this particular slide? And this is more for clarification, I think. When this came in last year, one of the things that we asked for was the landscaping along Dogwood and the landscaping along the access drive from Dogwood to the compound. And if I'm reading this plan correctly, that's 22 additional trees that will have split up between Dogwood Road and the access drive coming down from the main road.
Yes, so there's 8 trees additional here along Dogwood, 3 along the streetscape, and then 5 on the backside of that parking area. And then there's 11 along that shared property line.
Okay.
And then an additional 3 on the inside of that drive aisle. And then there's 2 here to begin to provide some shade to the larger play space around some of the more organized play spaces at the request of the school administration.
And as a follow-up to that, will you go back to the artistic rendering of if a fully mature tree was on Dogwood? So I absolutely agree with the audience that this is a little deceiving. We know that the trees aren't going to be planted at being fully mature. We know people aren't going to be laying down to take pictures. But the reality is, from DRC's standpoint, one of the things that we really wanted to achieve was, and again, you're going to be able to see the tower. I think it's very clear that we're gonna see the tower if we're looking for it. But one of the things that we wanted was to improve the streetscape along Dogwood. So my question is, the types of trees that we're putting here and that we're putting along the access drive, can you speak on whether, the height at which they'll be planted, the growth rate, and the species? Because we had some conflicting information on at least the species of the trees.
Sure. So there's a combination along Dogwood of 2 oak species, a nuttall oak and a willow oak, both native to the area, both well adapted, should be able to handle any conditions that exist out there.
And those would be the 5 that's where you're adding the 5 along Dogwood, right?
Yes.
Okay.
I apologize, wrong direction.
It's okay.
Yeah, so there's 2 willow oaks and I believe 2 willow oaks and 1 nuttall oak along this space. And you'll see the existing trees that sort of form that streetscape that we are wanting to supplement. And so those are the trees there. And then again, the willow oaks and nuttall oaks. Both of those will be planted at 2.5-inch caliper, which is measured, it's a size measurement for the nursery industry, measured about 6 inches above the soil level of a new tree. At installation, those trees will be most likely between 10 and 15 feet tall. And those trees will put out, there'll be a slight period at the beginning where they will be adapting to their conditions. And that's one of the reasons we don't want to install the larger material. That adaptation period, the larger the plant gets, takes much longer. And now you sort of push out of that warranty period, and it takes 3 to 5 years for a tree to show negative effects, if it was installed in a much larger size. So that 2.5-inch gets us a good size while also quickly adapting and then pushing out that new growth. Those trees will grow, a few feet, 3 to 5 feet, depending on conditions, water, drought, temperatures, all that good stuff that's out of our control. But those will grow each year, and the mature height of both of those are between 60 and 80 feet tall. In ideal conditions, the willow oaks could push the 80 feet, but a safer assumption would be between sort of 60 and 70 feet tall. The willow oaks are much wider than the nuttall oaks, are a little more pyramidal in shape, so they're going to stay 40 to 50 feet wide, and then those willow oaks could push 60-ish feet wide, just to give you a little idea of the shape. Yes, tall. So 60 to 80 feet tall, and then 50 to 60 feet wide is about expected life for those trees. The trees shown in that rendering are going to be, 20-ish years, 15, 20-ish years old, just depending on growth rate. And that's nowhere near maximum size of those trees, just for reference.
Okay, and then along the access drive, is that where you were proposing the southern magnolia trees?
So there's more oaks along this access drive. There's a small swale that comes down there, and those oaks are a little better suited to handle the lower conditions than the magnolias are. The southern magnolias are primarily located along the front, the north facade of that compound, and then on this western side, and I'm happy to explain our reasoning there. The majority of these lots have significant tree cover, including some evergreens, though they are pines, some evergreens in their backyards. The majority of these houses along the front near the fire station do not have much matured tree cover at all in their backyards. So we pushed more of the evergreens to that western boundary to provide more of an immediate year-round screen, and used hardwoods on this eastern boundary to sort of supplement that existing hardwood forest that is there. I've got some photos on a flash drive if you'd like to see those, of those existing conditions. I'm happy to show those to you. That was our initial reasoning. I know Chairman Bruns mentioned possibly mixing in some evergreens to the eastern boundary and a couple more of the hardwoods to the western boundary, and we're happy to do that. I just wanted to explain our initial reasoning, but I'm happy to switch some of those around if that's amenable to the DRC.
Your reasoning was really and truly what I was looking for.
Sure.
I didn't know if there was some screening necessary to the west or more canopy necessary to the east. And
Yes.
Those questions. That was really the basis of my question.
Okay.
You have another one?
Is there any idea what the height of these trees that are left remaining around the compound are currently?
Currently, there are multiple still of the sort of 24 to 36 inch oaks around the compound. Those are likely 30 to 60, 75 feet tall, just depending on conditions.
Okay.
It's hard to know for sure without climbing one or coming up with an apparatus to measure it, but that would be a good estimate. I believe that's what many of the neighbors have been and concerned citizens have been told as well from other people besides the development team. So.
I was going to ask one more plant question as it is pertaining to the actual structure itself. Can we bring the slide up that illustrates the hollies, the cleara, and the magnolias to the north?
Yes.
Now, I'm fairly certain you had some involvement in developing this plan. If I was to draw a box around this area that connected the hollies to the magnolias and back, how big of area would you say that square is? If you're greater or less than a 50-foot barrier? The ordinance
It's going to be right at that 50-foot barrier. The drive is 12 feet, and you have about a 20-foot space here for a turnaround space, and so an additional 12, and you have the 4 to 6 feet here for the grading, and then you're going to have an additional 6 to 8 feet at least for those plants shown on this plan, and those Nellie R. Stevens holly will get anywhere from 10 to 20 feet wide. So, that buffer will increase, and those are on both sides of that plan. So the compound, Mike, please correct me if I'm wrong, is 80 feet? 90 by 30. So that additional 12 and 20, and then 6, and then 8 to 10 is going to be within that 50-foot number you're looking for there.
And just the reason I bring it up is as we're asking for, or you're asking for special conditions or variances towards special conditions, it helps to illustrate exactly what we're getting versus how it's written. And so we're blocked on, let's see, 8/9 roughly, or 7/8 rather, 7/8 on that buffer, and then there's additional trees and other plants elsewhere on the property.
Yes, that's correct. There's a good amount of existing trees on the park property to the south, and then a good amount of existing trees north all the way up to Dogwood, and then we're supplementing that obviously with the streetscape we discussed previously.
Well, very good. Any further questions from the commissioners?
I have a question. This is regarding the material for the fence. Have you guys considered any other material which is long-lasting, like brick or something, which is more consistent with the Dogwood, facade elevation?
Have we considered any other materials?
We have historically used this particular wood for two reasons. One, as it goes in and it grays, it weathers. It gives us a good material. Cypress does not seem to have the shrinkage issues that we do with other pine or other materials. Plus, when the fence is built, it is such a formidable structure that it keeps prying eyes, prying fingers outside of it. It doesn't move much. It is a very, very sturdy structure. And in this particular case, due to the fact that all of our columns where the wall will be tubular steel, it is all an integrated system. So, you know, in other areas you've seen them in the past. I'm sure you've seen them where there's been chain link and things like that. This particular application seems to be working best for all of us around the country right now.
I'd like to add just one more thing. There's, on the residences to our east, almost that entire fence line is sort of that, what I'll call matured fence with the more gray tones. You know, just the standard weathered, I'm not sure if it's pine or cedar, but that weathered look. And so again, if you'll notice in these photos, here you'll see the evergreen privet, but back here you really have a lot more of those grayish brown tones, and so that fence will naturally weather to sort of match that grayish brown tone. So again, that was just another reason for our selection of that cedar fence.
Does it require any kind of maintenance down the road?
It'll need to be replaced as those boards, you know, naturally weather and rot eventually, so it will need to be replaced, but it would be replaced to match what was approved on the DRC plans. But with the cedar, that is much longer lasting than the pine fence that you see sometimes used around town.
And these are 1-inch thick planks, so they're not the typical fence boards you might find at Lowe's that curl up and have dog ears. These are all 1-inch thick by 6 inches.
Any further questions from the commissioners? Very good. I do believe it's time for a vote. Oh, pardon me?
Fellow chairman and fellow commissioners, I think the vote before us tonight is simple. We're not here to discuss the tower location, unfortunately, and we're not here to, you know, discuss safety or cell coverage that we've been told that's a concern. That's not within our parameters. We're here to look at fencing, landscaping, and more importantly, the aesthetics of this cell tower. As this commission isn't anti-cell tower, right? We've approved a cell tower just last week on Neshoba Road that we unanimously voted in favor. And last year we voted in favor of the Madonna Center cell tower on Poplar. Both of these projects had two things in common. They're on private property, not public property. And the context of those locations had TVA and MLGW transmission towers. These towers were over 120 feet tall and industrial looking. The difference between this project and the one that we're looking at is context and site. Again, the aesthetics that were already there. We were putting, you know, 120-foot tall cell tower or higher, and we had transmission industrial looking lines. This project we're looking at is on publicly owned property, and the surrounding context is drastically different. We have a 1-story school, 2-story residential homes, and an adjacent park, not industrial transmission lines that we've reviewed and approved in the past. The tallest built structure in this area is 35, probably about a 35-foot, 2.5-story home, and 70-foot plus or minus tall trees. As we've already talked about several times, this tower is nearly 140 feet tall, 70 feet taller than anything around it in probably a few miles. I think the biggest thing that we need to consider is precedent. This commission constantly talks about precedent that we're setting by our decisions now for the future. This is one of those moments that we need to seriously consider the precedent that we may be setting with our vote tonight, that in the future, we're saying to public entities to come in and it's okay to place a 140-foot tower in the middle of a residential, highly densely residential setting, that they're requesting a number of variances to make this happen. The tower is aesthetically out of context, even though we've been provided, limited views. You've already alluded that, trees may cover it up, but that doesn't mean, from this playground yard or from the adjacent neighborhood or neighbor's yard or, even a couple blocks away, the vantage point of getting past that tree line and seeing this 70-foot tall tower sticking up in the air. So I believe the current proposal doesn't meet the high design standards, aesthetic standards, and expectations of this commission.
Thank you, Commissioner Schmidt. Any further comments from the commissioners?
So I just want to clarify, under the DRC authority, we don't look for the location of the tower, number one. Number two, the fallout zone, that's outside our jurisdiction, I believe. And the radio frequency, we are not looking at these three items, right?
No, sir. I think we're ready. Please call the vote.
Mr. Schmidt?
No, for reasons just stated.
Oh, pardon me. Oh, yes. Thank you. Yes, as Commissioner Schmidt has stated, please, with your yes or no vote, an explanation for the record. Thank you.
Okay. He's already, okay.
Mm-hmm.
Mr. Sloan?
Again, we're going to be able to see the cell phone tower. At 140 feet, the design of 140 feet, I do believe that prevents 3 additional towers from being required at the previous 100-foot height. At 140 feet, this tower can accommodate up to 4 users. For staff, for the committee, for the audience, very similar to what we required of the cell phone tower on Neshoba that we just approved. Again, we realize that the landscaping along Neshoba Road is not going to prevent us from seeing the tower. What it's going to do is provide some sense of curb appeal for the majority of people that are driving up and down these roads. Dogwood Road, sorry. No, well, then that was correct. So on Neshoba, from what we previously approved. Similarly here, we've gone to great lengths to require this developer to add additional curb appeal, again, for the benefit of the city, not necessarily as they're presenting it, that it would somehow block us from seeing the tower. And for those reasons, I'm voting yes.
Thank you.
Ms. Sherman?
Well, first I'd like to say, I truly appreciate all the families that have come out, have come forward and spoke how you feel. However, I do feel that the project meets the required guidelines, and I vote yes.
Mr. Carney?
I'll vote yes for the reasons stated by Mr. Sloan.
Mr. Kumar?
I do appreciate everybody coming here and talking about their concern, but at the same time, I understand that we are looking at this from the DRC authority, and those 3 items I just said, they are outside our preview. So looking at the landscaping, I understand they're asking for the waiver. However, I feel that the landscaping meets the design intent. And the other concern was regarding children's safety. I believe the way they have presented the fence around the tower, I think it meets the safety requirements. So I will vote yes.
Mr. White?
Decisions like these are never easy decisions, especially when our citizens line up on both sides of the issue. And I've heard that from many of you, and so I also want to thank Ms. Cole, Ms. Waddell, Ms. Curlow, Ms. Warren, and others who have spoken tonight, and I'm grateful for your time. I do believe that we voted on this last time and approved the design review of it. That has improved. The design review has improved according to the guidelines that are given to us, and so I'm supporting the motion. Yes.
Chairman Bruns?
Thank you. As the other commissioners have stated, I do appreciate you coming in tonight and speaking your piece. As it's been stated by many, and I do respect Christopher's position, and I think he stated it very well, perhaps perspective is different, but as this application reaches the DRC, and as chairman, we are tasked with a very specific viewpoint of this. So, they can exit. The viewpoint is this, that the location has been determined, the height has been determined, all the safety, child safety included, all of that has been discussed otherwise. It has nothing to do with my decision tonight. While it is a yes, it is strictly because the application has done its best to make sure, while it is a 140-foot cell tower, that it is concealed as best as it can be on this site. And that's what I'm tasked with, and that's why I vote yes. As you've heard, the motion does pass. I will now entertain any old or new business. Hearing none, we are adjourned.